and by Hopkinton Drug, an integrative pharmacy and community partner since 1954, providing customized compounded medication in their on-site lab, nutritional supplements, and a knowledgeable staff. Hopkinton Drug, believing food, exercise, and community, along with an integrative approach to medicine, can help you achieve your wellness goals.
This is HCAM TV.
Yeah. Okay, good evening. Oh, wait. Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Amy Rodobarsh, and I'm going to call the Select Board meeting for January 24th, 2023 to order. This meeting of the Hopkins Select Board is being held both in person and remotely using the video conference platform Zoom. Some members will be participating remotely tonight, Muriel Kramer, and as far as I know, Mary Jo will be here, but she doesn't seem to be here yet. Okay, so let's see. So all the members will be present in the meeting room, Town Hall Room 215, 216. At this time, I will ensure that the Select Board members participating remotely can hear and be heard. Is Muriel Kramer on the Zoom, and can she hear us?
I'm here, I can hear you.
Okay, and we can hear you. The public has the option of attending in person here at Town Hall or via Zoom using the link posted in this meeting's agenda. This meeting is being recorded. All votes will be taken by a roll call vote. Our first item on the agenda is to move into executive session. So we'll entertain a motion to move into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Purpose 3, to consider strategy with respect to collective bargaining relative to police, fire, and communication union, because an open meeting may have detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the board. The second reason, pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Purpose 2, to consider strategy with respect to negotiations with non-union personnel, the police chief and town manager. Also to approve executive session minutes from January 10th, 2023, to allow Norman Camalo and Elaine Lazarus to participate in the executive session, and to reconvene an open session at the conclusion of executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and then we need a roll call vote.
Irfan Nasrallah, yes.
Shirley Vernon, yes.
You're okay, yes?
Amy Rodobarsh, yes. Okay, so we'll be back shortly. think we're ready when HCAM is, right? We're ready? Okay. All right, good evening. My name is Amy Ritterbusch, and I'm going to call the Select Board meeting back to order, returning to public session. Our first item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise if you're able. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. And then now we'll have our public forum. Okay. And then please note that each person will have up to 2 minutes to speak at public forum. Please start by stating your name and address. And we'll start with anyone in the meeting room, and then we'll move to those that are on Zoom. So is there anyone present in the meeting room who would like to speak at public forum?
Hi, my name is Doug Troyer. I'm a representative of Cumberland Farms at 91 West Main Street in Hopkinton. I'm actually here tonight to kind of share some opinions, ask a question. As this board's aware, there has been discussions about traffic and resolving some traffic issues down by the Cumberland Farms. This board, I believe, met in December of 21 concerning an agreement that Cumberland Farms had made with DPW as well as town manager and others, whereby Cumberland Farms agreed to make some changes to its site, eliminated a left turn in to make it an exit only, put some signs on the property, restriped it in hopes to address a phase 1 of a traffic report in which the town got in 20 to try and identify certain possibilities to relieve certain traffic issues there. In April of 22, Cumberland Farms had completed that, and we actually received a thank you from the town for basically looking to do certain things. Turns out that in April of 22, the town also engaged VHB, another traffic engineer, to basically provide a study which identified possible options of putting a lane separator from when you come off of the highway, basically a lane separator from the Mass property all the way up into the light at Lumber Street. In essence, what that does is that completely eliminates a left turn out of Cumberland Farms property. Cumberland Farms was a little surprised that this wasn't brought up. We weren't advised of this until September of 22. We wrote a letter to the town trying to engage the town in discussions about whether or not this was an actual safe situation to do. We had a meeting with the town in October, and we proposed alternatives, and we're hopeful. Cumberland Farms engaged its own traffic engineer, McMahon and Associates. We provided what our concerns were to that area, and we were hopeful to have a dialogue with the town along with its traffic engineer to discuss that. October until just recently last week, we heard nothing back from the town. I got a call from Mr. Westerly indicating last week that the town has made a decision to proceed with those lane separators. The concern in which we have is...
Your 2 minutes are up, so we can wrap up.
I will wrap up real quick. The concern that Cumberland Farms has is that no consideration has been made as to what is going to happen with the tanker truck traffic. By doing that, you're putting all tanker traffic on Cumberland Farms, not only deliveries but also fuel to downtown. There is no way anybody can make a turn out of there, and you're putting all of that tanker traffic to downtown. And we don't think that that's been taken into consideration, and we were hopeful, as everything else was, that there would be phases in this to study to see if the fixes which we did in April of 22 have worked. If not, go to the next step to leave open that left turn and see if that works. I'm asking this board, trying to figure out, because I've tried to have a meeting to talk with VHB, but I haven't been getting any responses, and I'm trying to basically see if we can have that meeting to explore those comments, to review the VHB report, and determine whether or not this is the actual safe thing to do. So I'm looking for guidance from the board as to what...
So this isn't on our agenda for tonight, so we can't really deliberate about it, but we could probably have you come to a future meeting where we could put it on the agenda and we could have more discussion. Does that sound correct?
To be very clear, the board does not normally respond to issues that are raised in open forum.
Understood.
But I think I will. Number one, the issue of delineators has been part of this conversation from the time we started talking with Cumberland Farms. Number two, we're very clear that we're going out to bid. We'll bid the project. We will implement the project.
That's our concern, is that there hasn't been any... I don't believe that you have studied and provided the data to this board to make the determination if that is what should proceed, because you don't realize what the traffic is, what you are creating. And if you want taker trucks to go downtown to take a ride at the schools as the only way to get out of town, it doesn't make sense. And we've cooperated with you guys,
So
and
this
we
is
work
not-
with you guys in an
This is-
effort to
This
come
is
to a
not on the
solution.
agenda, so
The
we-
problem I have is I'm not
Okay.
getting any return phone calls from the town manager or Mr. Westerly, and I'm forced to come here to ask the board to really take a look at this situation. If I would have returned phone calls, if I would have had the opportunity to discuss
Okay,
this.
yeah,
Point of order.
we got 2 minutes.
Not an opportunity or the right venue to air grievances and complaints about anybody. But I think that, I would support a conversation in an appropriate fashion.
That's what I'm asking for
Yes,
tonight.
I'll talk to Mr. Kamala and Mr. Westling, and we will see if we can get you on a future agenda where we could.
Thank you. My
have more
concern was
time,
that it was an
but-
imminent situation before I would have an opportunity to at least do it. I'm not trying to be aggressive, I'm just trying to have an
But this is-
opportunity.
Okay.
We're done.
We're done. Yeah. Okay. Is there anyone else in the meeting room that would like to speak at public comment? Okay, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Robert Sable, resident of 23 Apple Tree Hill Road. And I know tonight you guys are going to be going over the draft of the IMA. I read it, the rest of my colleagues read it. Also to note that I'm an employee for the town, I work for the Public Safety Communications. And it's a lot of legal jargon, so hopefully the questions that you guys have on the IMA language is the same questions that we have. But a few things that I would want to highlight, and I know a couple of my colleagues have other things that they're going to highlight. It states that this rec center is slated to be in Westboro, but it doesn't give a specific location. Now, it's been debated on if it's going to be on a super site, but that does have issues in terms of contamination and toxicity. And we would like to know if that's going to be the location, what is the plan to deal with the EPA standards and to make that safe for us to be on if we were to be employed there, as well as the staffing levels. I know it's, the IMA sort of outlines in terms of keeping the current staffing levels, but does that include the one dispatcher for Grafton as well as the one dispatcher for Southborough, or are we going to bump those numbers up to adequately handle the call volume? So I definitely look forward to what you guys are going to talk about later with the IMA. And also I just want to state that while our concerns definitely lie in our careers and our future, anyone would be concerned about that, but we do care about public safety, and we do care about the residents of our town as well as the towns of the other communities. So just make that clear that we do care about public safety. Thank you.
Thank you. And I appreciate you sticking to the 2 minutes, unlike the last person. Okay. Would anyone else like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Kylie Davis. I don't reside in town. I'm an employee of the Hopkinton Police Department Dispatch Center. As Rob mentioned, some of us have a series of questions. I just would like to ask those, and then I'll happily step down. I did have time to review the draft of the IMA. The question of the dark station still has not been answered. I do believe that's very important, not only for, the officers in town, but for the residents. The MIA refers to the rec as a district. I do believe there was conversation on whether or not the town would be able to have a vote if we were to move towards a district model versus the model that the state had originally offered. Rob already mentioned staffing levels, but I'm going to stress again that knowing the minimum amount of employees on per shift is critical. With 4 departments, it should be no less than what's already currently working for each of them. So that would be 6, and to bring Southborough up to standard, and as well as Grafton, I'd say 8. Are we keeping Pro Phoenix? Has the rec decided which software we're going to be using? Because that was a big investment that Hopkinton made. All of the surrounding towns do have to update their software to something, so it'd be nice to know if we're keeping ours or if we're going to have to transition. And then there was a word within one of the subsections in section 13, specifically the district personnel, subsection C, where it says may. I think it should be shall.
For which item? 13?
13C, first sentence, it says may. I think it should be shall.
May versus shall.
And that's all I have at this time. Thanks.
Okay. Would anyone else like to speak at public comment?
Good evening. My name is Chuck Wallace, Pinecrest Village. I'm speaking as a retired 30-year police officer for the town of Hopkinton, as well as a resident, and I thank you all for your due diligence on this. As you know, we all still have a lot of questions that still need to be answered, but I'd just like to touch briefly on 2 points. The first one is the employees. As Kylie and Rob stated, one of the issues is in section C of 13, as Kylie stated. I'm very surprised that the word may is in there instead of shall. At the last selectmen's meeting, the town manager said that the numbers that are reflected in Collins' report are substantially different than what would be hired. So I'm very surprised to see that word may instead of shall. The Collins report that you were provided by the town manager in September states that the project team does not recommend a change to the ratio. The ratio is 15 dispatchers and 3 working supervisors. As Kylie stated, I think that needs to be increased if we're going to be maintaining the staffing level as well as keeping our current employees employed. Currently, we have 18 dispatchers between full and part-time. If you add it all up between the 4 towns, it comes to 36. The Collins report states that there are only going to be 15 needed, and then 3 dispatchers. The other thing I'd like to talk about is efficiencies. I know at one time it was talked about that the reason for this is for cost savings, and then that was done away with, and now we're talking efficiencies, which I'm glad it is. I've made several phone calls to police chiefs as well as supervisors of rec centers, and one of the things that I have a concern about, if you read the Collins report, it says that the town of Hopkinton over the next 3 years is going to be upgrading.
If you can wrap it up a little.
Thank you very much. We'll be upgrading our equipment. The report says that's going to be a cost of $1.2 million. If you read Section 5 of Collins Report C4, it says that any equipment currently owned by any of the communities that join a rec center would still need to be maintained by that town. So I'm just wondering what the efficiency is if we're going to be paying over $1 million to join a rec center. That doesn't make very good sense to me. Real briefly, I spoke with a chief who's been in a rec center for 10 years. Their station, they didn't want it to go dark. They had to hire an additional 9 clerks at top dispatcher's pay to keep the station open. He tells me the 2 things that he has heard from the residents is if a resident comes into the station to talk to a police officer, the clerk has to call the rec to tell them to send the dispatcher back to a police station or wherever the call may be. So efficiently, I don't know why we would want to do that. The other thing is, when I spoke with a rec supervisor, one of the major concerns that they have from their residents is the lack of knowledge of the town and the people that are in their town. You're getting a stranger to answer a call. Like it's been said before, if you go to the old Brown Smith restaurant, the old timers like me would know where to go. Not everybody would in town. My thinking is this: if we're now looking at efficiencies for the town of Hopkinton, I hope the final vote will be that we need no longer look any further than the efficiencies that we currently have at the Hopkinton Police Department. We have dedicated professional employees and dedicated and professional supervisors as well. So I don't think we need to look any further than 74 Main Street. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Would anyone else in the room like to speak? Okay. And there's someone on Zoom as well. Okay.
Hello, my name's Shannon Casey. I'm one of the dispatchers here in town. I did just want to say that we know you guys are in a tough position. It's not going to be an easy decision to make. We understand that, and we appreciate you guys trying to answer all of our questions, residents' questions, doing your research. There's a lot of information out there. But I just really quick wanted to go over the last meeting. Chief Miller gave a presentation on dispatching and call taking. And he was talking about having like 2 or 3 call takers and then 2 dispatchers, and how a crash on the highway would be able to get handled better or faster, and that's just not the case. I mean, we've been doing this for years, and we get response out right away, and we've never had an issue. And if the 911 phone rings, we get 2, 3 calls, we already have the 2 dispatchers on that can answer those calls. However, the other issue is if somebody calls on 495 heading north, Hopkins is going to get that call first, right? So if there's one accident, we could get 5, 6 calls from the same accident, right? So we have 2 dispatchers handling that. They're driving into Westrow, so our line might be busy, so now Westrow is going to get the call, because by the time it gets picked up, they've now crossed into the town line of Westrow. So now Westrow is going to get those same 5, 6, 7 calls. So now you're literally just doubling the calls for the same number of dispatchers. So it doesn't help at all in that sense. I've talked to dispatchers at the Metacomet Center where you guys toured, and they have sent people to the wrong addresses because the call taker is separate from the dispatcher. You know, the call taker puts in the address that they hear or think they see, dispatcher goes off of whatever they typed in. They're not listening to the same call. Now your officers are going to the wrong house. That's so dangerous for our residents, dangerous for the police officers. I can't imagine the fire department would appreciate that either. And then just a quick personal story. Having the dispatchers know the town makes the difference. I'll be real quick. My stepfather had to call 911 because he was having a stroke. Sorry, my mother had to call 911 because my stepfather was having a stroke. She has muscle spasms on her vocal cords, so she can't speak very well. It's a whisper. The first dispatcher that answered couldn't understand her. Couldn't understand what she was saying, why she needed help. In a rec center, that call taker is the call taker. They don't get to say like, oh wait, hey, can somebody else, does anybody know this person or recognize this address? That's not going to happen. Here, the other dispatcher saw the address, knew who it was. What can I do for you? He knew her voice, could understand her, got help to my stepdad right away. Had it been a regional center, honestly, it could have been a different turnout. And that's personal to me, that's scary, and many residents in town have the same fear. It's not going to help the town, it's not going to be better in any sense. Your officers don't want it, your dispatchers don't want it, many firefighters don't want it despite what you've been told, and most of the residents don't want it, and they've expressed that. So as you guys representing the residents in the town, I just hope you guys all consider that when you're making your decision.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room? Okay.
Hi, good evening, thank you. I'm Kim Clark from 24 Mayhew Street. I'm the one with the muscle spasms. As far as the residents in Hopkinton, I think you would find that they don't want this. They really don't want this. People are being intimidated into being silenced. That's sad, hard to hear, very unfortunate. You had a lot of comments and questions at the last meeting. I wrote them all down. I'm hoping there will be answers to them. I'd like to make sure there are. I just want to reiterate, I am against this wholeheartedly and don't want to see this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room that would like to speak before I go to the person on Zoom? Okay.
Good evening, Donnie Collins, 45 Teresa Road. I'm kind of not 100% against it, but I just think there's too much behind the scenes. But one comment that I heard earlier from Chief Bennett is no matter what model is chosen, whether it is the rec or whatever, these three department heads are going to do the best they can to make it work for the citizens of the town. So, I mean, I wouldn't expect anything less from them. They're three smart, classy people that have all three served the town well over the years. My main question is, I've been to a couple of selectmen's meetings. I was at the thing at the senior center, and I still think that we got more answers now today than have been answered. And I just think that we're still rushing into this. I don't think there's any rush. I've stated that numerous times. I'd just like us to get all the facts and figures, be able to do it like grown adults. You know, you guys handle, you know, your news and the way you process things, and I think that we just need, I know you're not going to get all the answers, but I think we need as much as we can. And now it seems like it's the 11th hour now, and now there's a rush to judgment, and I don't think we're serving ourselves or the townspeople by rushing to any judgment in this. It's a forever thing. You know, we've all heard the downsides of if you try to go back to the old-fashioned way, it just doesn't happen without a prohibitive cost to the town. And I'm still very much in favor of slowing things down. You know, let's get a grasp on things. You know, let's let some of these rumors and scare tactics, if you will, you know, find their own, you know, level. And then let's decide this on facts and not scare tactics and stuff. And I mean, we got a solid group of people. You know, I've been on the fire department here for like 38 years, and I've been at all kinds of different emergencies, and I trust my life with any one of them that are dispatching, as well as the fellow firefighters and police officers that we all team together in this town. And the dispatchers are a very large part of that. You know, they're just not the person at the other end of the radio. It's people we know, people that, you know, they can tell if my voice is, you know, a little on the higher end, higher pitched end or whatever. And I just think that it's a lot to give up, you know, and I understand the whole consolidation thing, but I don't think that's, you know, it's all about that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
One second. Donnie?
Yes.
Would you tell us what your profession is and what you do?
I am an assistant fire chief at Logan Airport for the Massachusetts Port Authority. I'm a reserve cop in the town of Boxford. I'm a special police officer here, and I've been a paramedic for a long time, both in town and up on the North Shore as well. So, thank you.
Is there anyone else in the room? Okay, and there's Patrick O'Brien is on Zoom, if we could liven him up.
Yeah.
We can, you can go ahead.
Patrick O'Brien, 13 Ray Street. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. I am a retired 32 years for Hopkinton Police Department, as well as a resident of Hopkinton. Madam Chair, I am still in the dark as to why the town is still in the process of deciding whether to take the public safety dispatchers out of the police station in Hopkinton and move them to a rec center in Westboro. Up until this point, the town has not provided the residents any information as to why this is a good idea. The town manager has told the residents in public forum that this process is not about any financial reasons. This process is about whether moving the public safety dispatchers into the rec center and out of Hopkinton Police Department would be more efficient to the residents of Hopkinton. The fire chief 2 weeks ago gave us a PowerPoint presentation. We saw a hypothetical scenario about a hypothetical rec center dispatching hypothetical units to emergencies. Madam Chair, the residents deserve facts. They do not deserve hypotheticals. It would have been much better if the residents had heard, well, that type of scenario had indeed happened in Hopkinton. And if it did, how did our dispatchers handle it? Or, if it has not happened yet in Hopkinton, and if it did, how would our dispatchers handle that? Madam Chair, there's been many questions asked by residents that have not been answered. Our residents deserve those answers before this process goes any further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think we're done with public comment. I don't see anyone else's hand raised on Zoom. Okay. Okay, so the next item is our consent agenda, which we will consider approving the minutes of January 4th, 2023, January 10th. We will consider accepting the resignation of Renee Dean from the Sustainable Green Committee, and we will consider appointing John Cardillo to the Veteran Celebration Committee for a term which expires June 30th, 2023. Does anyone want to call anything out or make a motion?
What's in?
What?
C.
Oh, you want to call it C?
No, C.
Okay.
Oh, there it is, right there.
Yeah. Okay, so shall we do the first two then?
Yeah. I thought the minutes were excellent, by the way. This time, everything was right there. They were great.
So I move to approve the consent agenda, accepting item 3.
Okay. And then a roll call vote?
Irfan Asrulli, yes.
Yes.
Irfan Asrulli, yes.
Mary Jo Lefreni, yes.
Shahid Manan, yes.
Amy Ritterbusch, yes. Okay, and then we will consider appointing John Cardillo to the Veteran Celebration Committee. And John, would you like to come up? Would you like to tell us a little bit about your interest in the position?
Well, John Cardillo, 84 Winter Street. I'm on 2 other committees here in town, and I had promised about 3 or 4 months ago, a veteran who I've gotten to know very well, actually lives in Revere. I promised him there was an opening, and I knew there was an opening, that I would try to get on it. It's important to me to support our veterans, and considering what they sacrificed for us all, I think it's incumbent upon me to support in any way I can.
Great. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions?
Really all I wanted to know.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for stepping up.
Yeah, no, we really appreciate you stepping up. I know the agenda says there's only 1 vacancy, but I think we approved another resignation last week, so I think there might even be 2 vacancies in case, but.
Well, we appointed Mr. Kramer to that committee.
But I was thinking that we had, well, anyway, it doesn't matter, we at least have 1 vacancy, so we're very happy to appoint you, yeah.
Madam Chair, I move to appoint John Cardillo to the Veteran Celebration Committee.
Okay.
Second.
And then a roll call vote?
Irfan Asrulli, yes.
Mary Jo Lefreni, yes.
Shahid Manan, yes.
Yeah, Mary Kramer, yes, and thank you, John, for becoming the quintessential town volunteer. We appreciate you.
Amy Ritterbusch, yes. Okay. All right, next is the consolidated budget submission. And let's see, and if members of the school committee or appropriation committee are here, they're welcome to also ask questions. I know the appropriations committee hasn't posted an agenda, so they can't deliberate, but they can ask questions, is my understanding. Okay, so with that. And you have a slideshow?
Yes, we do. Ben.
Hello, Ken.
Okay, good evening, everybody. And let me first of all begin by thanking our volunteer teams for working with your respective constituencies, departments, to formulate the budget requests. The school superintendent, school business finance director, the town CFO, Tim O'Leary, the assistant town manager, Elaine Lazarus, the senior accounting manager, Liz Rook, the senior leaders who lead our departments, for your work compiling your budget requests. Also want to take this opportunity to thank different constituencies in town who supported us or continue to support us in our budget listening sessions, specifically calling out our senior services team for coordinating our first listening session, the Chamber of Commerce, as well as the HPTO. Included in your packet is the Town Manager's Budget Transmittal Memo, as well as the exhibits that came along with the memo. Some brief comments to share. Ben, slide 1. Yeah, I have some brief comments to share about the detailed 18-page budget transmittal that I forwarded to you on January 20th. CFO Tim O'Leary, who is here with us, will also address some key points. Again, let me acknowledge the unprecedented level of outreach, engagement, and collaboration that has occurred with the community, and across the town enterprise. Those efforts included 4 public listening sessions, several joint meetings between the Select Board, the Appropriations Committee, and the School Committee, as well as public hearings held by the School Committee. A great slide 2.
That is slide 2.
Yes, slide 2, yes. Yep. A great deal of work has been done to evaluate both the sources and proposed uses of funds. More work needs to be done. As the memo and the slide reflect, the package before you is not yet balanced. Over $2.8 million in requests above the 5.1% threshold identified in the budget guidance have been submitted. After a great deal of work, a budget gap of $1.1 million remains at this time, summarized in enclosure 1 of the budget memo. Slide 3, Ben. Some of our budget objectives remain unchanged. Sustaining services and meeting contractual obligations are continuity objectives. You will see an additional objective, exercising restraint on capital requests, which recognizes the extremely large pool of capital requests that are under consideration for future years. As shown in enclosure 5 of the budget memo, I am recommending that some capital projects be deferred until after the large school projects are resolved. I am recommending that the Select Board consider offering town meeting and the voters the chance to decide on 5 capital initiatives that will be funded through debt outside the tax levy limits of Proposition 2.5.
Nearly, I have to check.
Muriel, can you mute?
But yes. I'm gonna have to check.
I can hear
To restate, I am recommending that the Select Board consider offering town meeting and the voters the chance to decide on 5 capital initiatives that will be funded outside the tax levy limits of Proposition 2.5.
Yeah. Texture.
I think she must keep bumping the space bars. I think that unmutes you. Okay, give it a try again.
Yes, just in summary.
Thanks, Amy, you helped me. Appreciate you.
Again, the idea being there are 5 projects that I'm recommending to the Select Board be presented to the voters through the ballot question process. They are shown on enclosure 5, page 1 of the budget memo. I do not necessarily endorse any of those projects at this time. Tax impact is a very serious issue facing the community, and the projects put forward should be reviewed and considered very carefully in that context. Then slide 4. While not yet balanced, the budget memo does include some key priorities that have been consistently and repeatedly emphasized by the Appropriations Committee. I'm often asked the question, what's the role of the Appropriations Committee? And I say two things. One, they are the guardians of our budget policies, of our financial policies. And secondly, they are the eyes and ears of the community reviewing the budget with a view towards forming a recommendation for town meeting's consideration. So what I'm referring to here are the messages that have come through that process that we have heard loud and clear. Namely, the budget proposes a step increase in funding for future retiree health care costs. We often call this the OPEB contribution, from $420,000 to $833,000, with an expectation that the contribution will be raised by 2.5% a year. Last year, the Appropriation Committee report advised that the town was on track to have the OPEB liability fully funded around 2058. With additional information from a subsequent actuarial report, the town requires the increased contribution recommended to track towards full funding in the early to mid-2050s. The budget also recommends adding $700,000 to the town's general stabilization fund. Town financial policies recommend a combined free cash and stabilization balance of 5% of the operating budget. This contribution would raise the stabilization fund from $3.9 million to $4.6 million, leaving a sufficient certified free cash balance to meet the target. While the town did not have to tap into the general stabilization funds during the COVID emergency, having an adequate stabilization balance or rainy day fund allowed the town to avoid the draconian budgetary measures some other towns took in the face of uncertainty, including, in some cases, staff layoffs. This document also funds all recurring needs with recurring resources, which is a third priority emphasized in financial policy and by the Appropriations Committee over the past years. As you know, and we have stated this publicly, in our last perhaps 2 or 3 budgets, we have used one-time funding sources to fund recurring expenses. The budget that we're proposing tonight does not do that. While the budget proposal is not yet balanced, slide 5, Ben. While the budget proposal is not yet balanced, several factors identified in the budget memo and shown on slide 5 helped with a portion of the over-target requests that have been submitted. More work remains to be done. Slide 6, Ben. If the budget is balanced within the tax levy limits imposed by Proposition 2.5, the tax impact for next year's budget will be a 2.32% increase. Again, 2.32% increase on the tax bill of existing property owners. That's $276 on the $11,910 tax bill of our average property owner. The 5 borrowing options that I spoke to earlier being put forth will add $57 more to the bill in the peak expense year. $15 will be added as projects approved in previous years come online for repayment in fiscal year 2024. Slide 7, Ben. More work will be required to bring the budget into balance. The areas of work identified in the budget memo are shown on the screen. There is work involved for town hall and school department staff, for the select board, and for the appropriations committee. I am confident that we can come together to achieve what must be done. And what's different this year is that we have stated publicly that we, as your staff, can balance this budget. However, given what we're seeing and looking at in the coming years, it's even more important or imperative that we do this together with the community. As a local government practitioner, I'm always sensitive to not getting ahead of the community. Secondly, we understand that these are going to be very difficult conversations. They will entail discussions on austerity and scarcity. And thirdly, we're very mindful of what is coming down the pike in terms of our capital projects. And thus, at this point, with your permission, I'll ask Tim O'Leary, our CFO, to walk you through a couple of these details.
Thank you. Good evening. Can we go to slide 8, please? First, I agree with Mr. Kamala that the town has a path to developing a budget solution for fiscal year 2024. Slide 7 on the screen shows the summary section from the 5-year forecasting model, which is provided in enclosure 2 of the budget memo. And that summary shows a growing imbalance projected between sources and uses of funds in future years. We've seen this issue before, and the issue has been addressed in several successive appropriation committee reports, and it's been discussed in prior budget cycles by the select board and others. Clearly, when the amount of new revenue available to the town within the tax levy is about $2 million, and when a single town department, a single important town department, has requirements for increases that are more than twice that amount, there's a structural problem on the horizon. A burst of new revenue from new growth has carried the town this far. That new growth has come from really two things: rapid expansion of the residential tax base and a very large recapitalization project that Eversource has done at their LNG facility. Residential growth is slowing, and the LNG facility is going to throw off its last new amount of new growth for us in '24. So we see new growth going down. It's difficult to see how, without another burst of new growth, the town can continue to increase departmental budgets at 6% or 8% or more within the tax levy limit, 2.5% plus what we can get from a smaller amount of new growth. It might be prudent for decision makers to keep that in mind when considering and prioritizing over-target requests this year, because they're really competing with requests from next year and the year after within the operating budget. Slide 9, please. Tonight's final slide has been presented many times in a series of public budget listening sessions over the last several months, but I think it's a natural wrap-up for tonight's discussion. You see that red line of debt bulging up as the result of the 5-year capital plan
even bulging up above our statutory debt limit, which is the yellow line that flows up to the top. Enclosure 6 of the budget memo shows a very large list of capital projects being considered by departments over the next 5 years. The list in the memo shows $297 million in general fund projects. And other informal documents that have been shared in the public on other projects underway contain estimates for some projects that are tens of millions of dollars above what's in the memo, above the formal estimates that have been submitted. And they're all moving targets. All those 5-year plans are moving targets. Please note also that there is no estimate for center school reuse in the list, and the planned infrastructure improvements for water are an entirely separate source of financial pressure on residents that are not even included in this graph. So the capital plan shows the estimated borrowing amounts, but the interest that needs to be booked as an obligation when the funds are borrowed makes this large amount even harder to absorb. So think about $275 million debt limit, and we have $73 million in debt today. So we're a little over 200 in allowable borrowing authority, and we have the prospect of hundreds of millions of dollars, $320 million in borrowing over the next 5 years. The provisions of Proposition 2.5 do allow voters to choose to spend at that level through debt exclusion votes. And there is potential that we could work hard and solve the timing issues with the debt limit. But the tax impact from this borrowing will be inescapable. In this situation, it's important to think about all planned capital projects as competing for scarce funding. And to remember not just to look at the next project in front of us, just like when we're driving down the highway, you have to look 4 cars ahead or 5 cars ahead. And that view down the highway is a little daunting right now.
Thank you, Tim.
Okay, thank you. Are you ready for questions?
We take questions.
Okay. All right, so, and if the school committee would like to come forward and, or Susan Rothermich, you're welcome to, if you have questions. So who would like to begin? I know a lot of questions and comments.
I can
You want to go ahead?
start and
Okay.
Thank you, Tim, and I feel really good that we are in your great financial hands, and with Norman's help, I think, and with everyone's help, with the school and all, so much focus on budget and thorough insights. It's really, really helpful. I really appreciate the work you and your team does. Few questions on our projected gap. So it's a little over 1 million, and I see that for our stabilization fund and for our OPEB fund, we have almost doubled the allocation this year. And I understand, and I'm a big proponent of both of those savings, as you remember. But I'm just thinking if this is the right year to bump it up by this much amount when we are kind of in a tight situation already, and what would be the urgency for this particular year?
So, thank you, sir, for the question. Really, there are, 2 separate questions, so let me try to address them one at a time. On the OPEB, it seems every time we get our OPEB recalculated, the number goes higher. And as the number goes higher, our funding percentage looks lower, and then that changes the actuarial's view, and we're in this downward cycle where our estimates that the actuary employs become more and more pessimistic. So we have seen quite a rise in our actuarial liability over the past couple of years, and we talked about that here in May, I believe. So this adjustment to get us up to a new level and then to start funding at that level gets us back on a track to have that liability funded by in the early 2050s. So still 30 years out to address this problem. We're just concerned that falling further behind sends a bad signal to the bond rating agency and
and it could be problematic and costly for us to do it, and it's the right thing to do. In terms of the stabilization, we have an objective of having a good stabilization fund, so transferring some cash from the certified free cash to stabilization is consistent with our policies. Again, shows the rating agencies that we're preserving our commitment to financial strength. And of course, the most important point is we could rob one-time sources and solve that recurring deficit, but then we would be back to you next year trying to figure out how to solve that problem again in a year when our projections are even worse. So we would be compounding the problem if we just took those easy actions, which we considered and discussed. We felt because of all the challenges facing the town, it was important to come into this phase of the budget process with a proposal that starts out true to our financial objectives and to seek to find other solutions. You know, the governor's budget will come out. That could be a solution. We've looked at all the other revenue estimates very carefully, and we don't see a lot of prospect there. So there's work to be done. But we didn't want to come in and have a meeting and say, we have solved your problem, and it'll be your problem next year.
I appreciate that. Just
In fact, the key here being consider the scale of the financial challenges in the coming years, consider the need to be compliant with our policies, and also most importantly, we want to give the community the opportunity to see how the other revenue sources that are not yet finalized could become part of the solution.
Thank you, I appreciate the response. My opinion is, obviously, again, I'm all for stabilization, and if you remember, like 7 years ago, we bumped it up from 200 to 400K, and for the last 5 or 6 years, we have been at 400K. I'm just thinking this is a year where we are at crunch, and we're enhancing the crunch by increasing it this particular year. And again, it's a, pain management. Either way, it can be painful, but is this the year to do that? And in other words, does it actually add to the risk management better by doing it immediate versus next year or subsequent years, where we can have potentially better revenue source of some kind, magically a versus problem goes away, whatever that might be. This is kind of exacerbating the challenge a little bit, but I understand completely. So, couple other just retail questions. The waste collections seem to have gone up by significant 20%. Just a quick understanding would be helpful.
So you'll be seeing the DPW director here to talk about that issue and the other line item increases. There are a handful of things where we have seen large contractual increases for long-standing services, and that's certainly one that stands out. That's highlighted as an increase. The DPW made some reductions in other areas of his proposed budget, and I think you'll have a good discussion with him when he comes here.
Yeah. Put simply, two factors. One, we know what China is doing now with regard to waste management. They're not taking our waste. Number two, we've always benefited from working with a local contractor. The local contractor has now been bought by a national corporation, and the terms of negotiations have changed.
So it was contractual obligation or renegotiation?
Have we negotiated the new contract yet, or that's just in progress?
We have a stopgap agreement, and we're working on a long-term contract.
Okay.
And through the chair, I'll have a couple more probably.
Go ahead.
For the Eversource, I'm glad you brought it down from 2.5 to 1.5. That gave us a little more breathing room. But as we look forward, our gap seems to be growing overall budget wise. projected deficit is 2 million, 3 million, and going over 4 million in the next 5 years. In those calculations, did you assume 2.5 still, or do you remember top of your head? I'm just thinking, did we account for the credits that we should deserve in a couple of years?
So, through the chair, sir, the assessors made a significant contribution to the overlay this fall when they were setting the tax rate. We're looking at the tempo of resolution, and we think next summer we may resolve FY 17, 18, and 19. So this is, as we've said in our previous discussions, this is getting to be a big oil tanker. This isn't a little speedboat anymore. This overlay issue is a big oil tanker. But because the tempo of resolution is so slow, we feel we have time to steer that oil tanker. And if we need to increase overlay in the future as we see what kind of results we get from the appellate tax board, we think we have time to do that. We think it'll be, this is a big growing problem, but it's going to be decades before it's all resolved. Unless Eversource is bought by a larger, more friendly company, and they begin paying their taxes, and then it will be solved very quickly. But that's, again, a balance. When you talk about taking risk by considering these actions, we looked at that action very closely, and we think we'll still have 70% coverage when they file their expected appeals next year. And then we hope to get some more relief next summer when a series of appeals with the same fact pattern as the last series that were settled could go our way. Now, ordinarily, you'd kick that money out of the overlay. If that happens, we would probably be talking about leaving it in there and working that into our long-term strategy. So our hope of releasing all that money out of the overlay in the near term is probably not something we should found our dreams on.
Understood. Thank you. And the last one for this round is for the growth projection, what are the drivers for going down from 3.5 to 1.5?
So it's, we were down to 1.5 in our last iteration. Tonight's memo brings it back up to 1.65. And it's that we picked up $70 million in valuation each of the last 2 years at the LNG renewal. And we're thinking that we'll have another 30 million when our consultant goes in and reviews the project. That's our best estimate. So that's it could have been 70, 70, and 0, and now we're thinking it's going to be 70 million of taxable value and 30 million. And then we're seeing a couple things. We've worked very closely with Elaine and her team on the residential build-out, which is changing. So there's fewer new houses under construction. We sat down with the planner, with Elaine, with the assessor, and we talked street by street, house by house about what's being built. And what we're seeing is fewer houses, of course, but they're more valuable houses, and they're selling at high price points. So that helped us out a little bit. But we're...
Sorry.
Yes, ma'am, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say on the issue of growth, the thing that we learned is that it's the resale of properties that really drives new school children, so not growth numbers, but it's just an important consideration for the public and for the board that as taxes increase, people who have raised their children and put their kids through school are more likely to bid farewell to Hopkinton and find places to live that don't have the same kind of taxes. I have a baby in the background helping me. And the people who live in those houses are young families with children that we need to educate. And so it's really important to think about all the implications of the movements and the decisions that we make.
I just wanted to correct that. Maybe we can get the slide for next time, but I remembered it differently from the growth study committee, that we did show that without legacy farms, this was 2 years ago, the school enrollment would have been about the same as it was 10 years ago. So I thought we had demonstrated actually the opposite, that it was really the new construction that caused the increase in school children, not the turnover of houses. But we had a slide on it. Maybe we can find it for next time.
My point was that will happen if our taxes go is likely to happen as our taxes increase.
Yeah, okay. Did you get all your questions, Shane?
Pretty much for this one. Thank
Okay.
you.
And Muriel, did you have more questions?
I do have a few questions, actually, thank you. First, I want to thank all the town staff and town volunteers, the appropriations committee, all the committees, school committee, and select board for doing such a really thorough job in a hard financial time. And I appreciate the transparency of the difficulties coming forward and the ways that we're going to have to make decisions tonight that build in sustainability for the future, right? Each time we vote a budget, we need to build in some real conversation about sustainability. So it's also, I guess, my way of encouraging the public to come forward and find a way to participate in these conversations and for us to continue to try and engage with the public, because these are decisions that will shape the future for a long time in Hopkinton. One of the questions that I had first was if Mr. Kamala or Mr. O'Leary could spend a little time talking about, so we get a lot of visibility to the school committee budget process, which we all did shape. There isn't quite as much visibility in the day-to-day discussions about how the budgets are decided for other really important town departments. So I wonder if you could spend a little time telling us about potentially the initial requests that we don't see tonight for departments like DPW, for the police, for the library, for the fire department, for DPW, and what they have already sort of worked out of their requests before we see this picture.
So I did have a question. I think the departments are going to come to us individually at the future meetings over the next month. So maybe we could get that information at that time?
Yes, in fact, this is going to be a two-step process. We'll have the individual departments coming in before the select board, and after that, the select board will schedule a public hearing. I'm looking to Elaine for the appropriate term. I know we've gone back and forth in terms of whether it's a public hearing or public meeting. So yes, department heads will come before the select board, and following that there will be a public hearing where the select board will invite the public to come and give its input.
And like Muriel, I would be curious to see what things that we would like to have, but we had to remove before we even got this far. Or they have to be delayed. All right, did you have a couple more, Muriel?
I do have a couple more. I have a question about how we formulate a game plan for what we are now talking about as the bow wave of capital requests and capital needs. And I even throw in a question about whether or not we have some discussion at town meeting this year, and we ask the town to weigh in on their priorities and their willingness to entertain whatever plan it is that we actually think we're going to, as a group, as a town, and town leaders, we're going to organize around and put forward. So, we talk about it, and it will come before us somewhat in piecemeal fashion for the final votes. But I think that people at town meeting this year need to really have an opportunity, if it's possible, to weigh in on the strategy that we are thinking we're going to pursue going forward. And so that also includes, I know Mr. O'Leary said that we don't have the reclamation of Center School currently on that capital plan, but it also includes the real reality that we have a reclamation of Elmwood School property as well. And it begins to really pile up. So I think that we need a comprehensive strategy and a way to make sure that the public is really understanding the implications of the decisions we're making. Even as we bring them to the town meeting, but to see the complete picture before we start making some of the decisions that will cause the subsequent decisions to be more likely. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Let me see if I can. I really appreciate, by the way, that a current $1.1 million shortfall is something that you have already strategized a way forward. I think it's worth saying here for the public and for everybody that we have an unbelievably professional team that really does wonderful work and will also make that extraordinary capital plan work if that's what the voters decide they want. But voters really need to know what they are quote unquote buying into and the impact going forward before we take the first vote on the first capital project that sets this whole strategy into motion. One of the questions I always have, and I don't see it in the slides, but is some detail on the revolving accounts, how they're being used, what the balances are, and if there's a way to leverage those to mitigate some of the operational budget spending that we're being requested by, in particular, the school department, but all departments.
We can,
I think that is on one of the enclosures that you sent.
yeah, slide 7.
But it's not
I
done.
went through all of the slides, I did. I didn't see the detail that I'm asking about.
Right, no, there's not the detail, it's just a suggestion.
In fact, if I may, I can share with the community that revolving accounts, the balances have been a significant feature in our budget formulation discussions. As recent as, I believe a week ago, we were talking about whether there are additional opportunities to go deeper into those revolving accounts to balance the budgets. So yes, your point is well taken. We will provide the finer detail to the public on the budget webpage.
Thank you. I want to make sure that we really spend a little time discussing the ways that what we're doing today potentially builds in structural issues going forward. I want to make sure that the decisions we make today are based in a process that we can argue capably is sustainable for the future. And I think that those are the questions that I have. And again, in appreciation, all of the transparency, all of the conversations, all of the hard work, and the fact that we are positioned better than we might have expected to be positioned, given the requests that we're facing. So thank you very much.
Okay. So, Mary Jo, would you like to go next? Or?
Well, I have gone over the budget and you can see all my notes, but really what I want to say tonight is that we're trying to be as transparent as possible. We are a transparent board, and it's been one of our big goals, and to get this budget out there for people to see is part of that. But what we really need is more than 128 people at town meeting making decisions for all of this money that's being spent. And what's coming down the road is enormous. And they have to be made aware of that it's not just this year anymore, it's this year and the future of the town. And, you know, it's just disheartening and disappointing to not be able to get a quorum for town meeting when we're talking figures like this, and budgets like this, and other articles at town meeting. And I really want to encourage people to get involved in the town, not just occasionally, and not just in what you are interested in. The town is a live entity, and we all need to be involved. And this is getting tougher and tougher and tougher, and it's not going to get better. So please pay attention, read the budget, and come to town meeting.
So
I don't have a lot to add or questions to ask.
But, I mean, I think really what's been said has kind of covered most of what I was thinking. My only real comments on this is one, you know, we've been relying on new growth for the past several years, and it's finally coming home. But we're still spending like that, like we have that source, you know, and that's, so, I mean, in my mind, what I'm saying is, okay, we needed to be disciplined. We're learning that we need to be more disciplined because we're going to lose that source. And part of that discipline is the capital projects that are being requested. So we'll take a good hard look at that and see what can come off. You know, I think we need to be responsible in how we spend your money. And as Mary Jo said, come to town meeting. You know, this is where your town government impacts you on a day-to-day basis. This is where we're spending all this money. And, you know, we'd like some people to participate and know where it's all going.
So I think my remaining questions, I noticed there were several capital items that the town manager recommended not go forward this year. I didn't know if the school committee had a chance to look at those, or they will, I guess, at a future meeting. So you have not looked at them yet, is it?
We have not had a discussion on them yet.
Okay. So I'm really glad that we're down to 1 million yet. That's better than where we were at the 2.8 million, but we're going to all have to keep an eye out for savings, and maybe some things will change, or maybe we're going to have to cut a little bit more. I didn't know if there's ARPA funding available for any of the capital projects. I think Rep. McGovern said that some of the state's ARPA money hadn't been spent yet, so I don't know if any of our projects qualify or not. Sure you.
We are reviewing the ARPA program closely to see if it can fund some of our projects.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then,
if I could, Madam Chair, it's, the available ARPA funding is about 5.3 million, and our need is like 320 million. So it's tremendous to have that, and it's going to benefit the community in some strategic way, and the board will have a chance to weigh in on how that will be, whether it's for water infrastructure or for school construction or for some other purpose. So we're looking at that very closely.
oh yeah, sorry, I was thinking ARPA was separate from the infrastructure bill, and I may have that wrong though, but.
Yeah, we don't have any of the infrastructure money yet.
Okay.
So that's just left Washington, and it needs to filter its way
I know. Okay.
out for us.
Okay, and then, let's see, and then the participatory budgeting that you proposed this year, I was curious if you've had any applications yet? I don't need to know what they are, but, or, yeah.
Good evening, I'm the Senior Accounting Manager, Elizabeth Rourke. We have received 2 applications thus far. The deadline is January 31st.
Okay. I was afraid nobody had heard, I hadn't heard any buzz about it, even though I know a press release went out, and I was afraid nobody would apply, but if, I mean, we were budgeted up to 100,000 for 5 projects. If we only get 2, then that would be a reduction as well, but maybe we can, people will get used to it this year, maybe we'll apply more next year.
Yes, it's a great program.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, and then,
In fact, if I may, on that topic, because I think this question has been asked, the question being, if we're facing budget difficulties, how can the town do the participatory budget? And my answer is, because we're facing difficulties, the more we need the community to participate in the budget formulation process.
okay. So there's still time to submit if people want to submit a project under $20,000 for consideration. Great. And I think, I don't know that I have any other additional questions, just that we do need to keep working at this so that we can, get rid of the $1 million gap. And, hopefully we won't have to reduce the OPEB or the stabilization, but if we need to, we could do that a little bit at least, it seems like, since we have increased it quite a bit. I don't think I have any other questions at this time, as long as everyone keeps working on it. Do school committee members or this, appropriations has a question? Do you want to come forward?
thank you for inviting us to this meeting. I just also appreciate all the work. I've been part of this budget process since the beginning, so I appreciate all the work everyone has done. I came into this meeting, my big question had already pretty much been answered. It was about the Eversource and the overlay reduction. That was big. I think Tim O'Leary did a good job explaining that, so I'm not as concerned about it as I was before. My second is a point. I know we were talking about the OPEB contribution and the stabilization fund. You know, when I looked at the high level, looked at the budget, I could see that that was funded through our free cash. And the point is very specifically that we really don't want to use free cash for our budget items. So that's why we're able to fund that at this level. And it's not a level that's exorbitant. It's $800,000 is what is expected. So we have employees who do work for the town, and it's our responsibility to do all the funding as we go along. That's my opinion here. And the stabilization, as our budgets go up, our stabilization should always keep on going up to have that cushion that we are expected to have. So I reiterate, I know it's tempting to say let's not fund OPEB and stabilization, but it is important where the source is from and that we keep on funding that. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Mike. Through the chair, thank you, Mike. I think we fully appreciate how the Appropriations Committee, you and all the members contribute to this process, and I appreciate all the hard work. Quick question related to that, the free cash flow, and I fully again understand and appreciate the allocation. It's more about, the timing of it and can we do it gradually. But we can, through the subsequent discussions, try to understand more about the urgency. One thing that actually you triggered with the free cash flow discussion, which is as much as we like the free cash flow at the end of the year, I wonder if we would be better off by, and I think we talked about it at times, by having those blended in within this year's budget or within the current budget, so that we don't have that much left over, but we have enough to spend for the good reasons that we need to spend for now. And one way to kind of measure that, and maybe this is something offline I can take, or if you have a report that can show, is for all the allocations, what has been our actual for the previous year and where we had seen the excess, maybe. And not to build a practice that, use it or lose it, but more to be, I think, more pragmatic about the allocations in the current year. And anything in excess, if you need it, we are always going to listen and hear, and if there's enough case, we can talk about allocating that. That may in turn reduce the free cash, but you may have enough from the get-go that you may need now. Just a thought, and a report would probably show some of that.
So, Madam Chair, sir, this is a very delicate point to work around. We budget cautiously, and the reason we do in the town form of government, we can't go back to the city council and get a budget adjustment every 3 months or every 3 weeks. We don't want to have a special town meeting because we need more payroll money, or we need, we've budgeted too tightly. So our annual cycle of approval with few chances to adjust it really require us to be a little more cautious than you might be in the private sector, or than someone might be in a form of government with a legislative body that meets every 2 weeks or once a month. So we need to be a little more cautious. And we have Mr. Kamalo, who is tight with a dollar, let me say. He is tight with a dollar, and part of why we have good free cash balances is that he has inculcated a feeling among the town that we're always trying to save money. We reuse folders. I mean, we don't do exorbitant travel. We do training by video if we can do it, whenever we can. So, and then every year there have been events, whether they be negotiated healthcare savings or savings on the fire truck that ended up being paid for with insurance instead of being an expenditure, that give rise to this free cash for us. And we don't know exactly where it's going to be, and because we budget by line items in town meeting, we have to balance that ability to manage, to have sufficient funds to manage what we think is going to happen.
Thank you.
But it is an important thing to look at, and we should be looking at that in the process when when we look at the budgets, definitely.
Thank you. Yeah, and I fully appreciate all the oversight and all the, I think, good work that you put in this allocation and spending and all those. It's a very complicated and complex financial situation, and I think you all are doing a wonderful job, spending a lot of effort and insights. One other thing to ponder as just a commentary, I think through this process, as we also have seen the challenges on the school budgeting process, and fully appreciate how the school committee and the school administration and all the teachers and everyone came together on handling a lot of challenges that we have been through or we are going through. It is a time to kind of, all of us to pause and think forward that how are we going to handle it, what are the options and the challenges that we have with the growth. And of course, school is our prime asset. We want to make sure we have all the right tools and funding for school to excel as they are. But the challenge, as we are seeing, is the inflation being high, with the contractual obligations going high, and our growth money going down, Eversource becoming a problem. These are all known problems, but the equation just doesn't solve together. So what are the options that we have, and how can we all be prepared to, acknowledge the elephant in the room and see what are the, what is the best path forward that we can collectively find out. And joining the town meetings would be certainly one, and understanding and educating ourselves on this more would be a very important part of it. Because it's only gonna, as I look at the next 3-5 year forecast and with all the capital budgets, it's only gonna get harder. So we need to come ourselves with the understanding what are the reality and what are the real options that we would be looking at.
Okay, so we are pretty behind schedule now, I'm realizing, so I think we should probably move on to the next topic. But if anyone has other budget questions, they should feel free to send them to the town manager, who will maybe get us more information for the next meeting.
Yes, and we will, again, as part of engaging the community, we'll be setting up office hours. We will continue with our informational sessions. If anybody wants us to come to your organization, neighborhood meeting, we are available to do so.
Okay, that's great. And if you do set those up, it would be great if you can just let us know, so maybe one of us can attend if we're available, just because I think sometimes people expect an elected official to be there as well.
Okay.
So, anyway, okay.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Okay, so the next item is the annual town meeting warrant. Okay. So I guess the first item is there's several articles that we would normally put into the warrant, the acceptance of town reports. So, do we normally do the salary of the elected official?
Yeah. Yes.
We do, even, I was thinking that was a personnel committee, but, okay. General bylaw amendments, the short-term rental bylaw, which we discussed previously. So the net zero resolution, that is new. Then we have some street acceptances and a pilot agreement. And so, I don't know if some of these we could move through quickly, but we definitely want to just submit these to the warrant like we usually do, and then the others we would discuss.
Yeah, so I think like street acceptance of the town manager, town reports.
Our elected official.
Elected official,
town
yeah.
clerk, yeah.
I think those would be the ones that we could just say, yeah.
Okay, so shall we make a motion to move items 1, 2, 5, and 6 into the town meeting warrant, and then we can discuss the others?
Yes, so moved.
Individually? Okay.
Second.
Okay, and then a roll call vote?
Irfan Ismaili, yes?
Amy Jolly, yes?
Shahid Manan, yes?
Amy Robish, yes? Oh, here you go. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 5, and 6. Okay, the next is the general bylaw amendment for a new short-term rental bylaw. We have had that in our packet before. Does anyone have any questions or comments on that one?
I think the first time I saw this, I asked the question, has this been a problem? Like, why do we need to do this? I'm a property rights kind of guy, and I don't see why you need a license to give a short-term rental. So is this a problem that we've been dealing with?
It doesn't require a license. I wasn't sure that it did.
It was prompted by
neighborhood discussion with the zoning advisory committee. So they had brought the issue forward to them, asking if it could be addressed by a zoning bylaw amendment. I believe Zach was sympathetic, but felt it should be a general bylaw and put to the town council rather than a zoning bylaw. And so work with residents to develop this draft for the board's consideration.
So have residents been complaining about short-term rentals? Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
We're going to talk about having a public forum, a public hearing on this in February, if it goes forward.
So, but to get it into the warrant, we would have to submit it before January 31st, right? But we still could remove it then later, correct? Okay.
But how would this licensing requirement resolve the issue that the neighbors are complaining about?
Well, I mean, if we had a public hearing, the neighbors might come and explain, I suppose, right?
Okay. I would like to hear that.
Okay.
Did some of this come up because of people renting like for Airbnb? Okay.
It's 30 days and less.
Yeah. And how about, I mean, a lot of people go away for the marathon weekend and rent the house to a runner. How's that going to work? Because it's only one weekend.
You gotta get a license. According to what I read there, you just gotta get a license.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, it kind of feels like this is, maybe it's the placement in the agenda today, but it feels like, oh, we're trying to close that budget gap.
Here's an idea. Now, through the chair, just following up with one question. What is the operational process going to be to manage all of these? For example, if for marathon it suddenly explodes into hundreds of applications, are we equipped to do that, and is it going to incur additional administration costs?
There will be a cost to manage it, and the board would be reviewing license applications at a meeting. But I don't know that there'll be hundreds, but there will be some.
Well, that's what it says 30 consecutive days or less. That wouldn't be 30 days if they're just renting it out for a weekend.
Maybe less.
So it's for rentals between 2 and 30 days. So for a weekend, if it's just 2 nights, that wouldn't count. It's not, it has to be at least 2 nights.
Yeah, it wouldn't count. I don't know.
Okay.
It has to go 0 to 30, isn't it?
What's that?
I said, those are my thoughts on it, I mean.
Yeah, I would like to have some kind of regulation on this, because I think a lot of towns do, and so that it doesn't become a problem, so that there's clear guidelines for how you can do a short-term rental or not. But I guess, so we should have asked for this further in advance, because we do have to decide by January 31st if it goes on the warrant. And we can't post a public hearing 1 week out, right? We need 2 weeks out. So we couldn't have the neighbors come, well, we could have, without it being a public hearing, we could have it on the agenda next time and ask the neighbors. Maybe we could invite. Well, okay, it's not a public hearing, right? So can we have a discussion with the neighbors at the next meeting, or it's too soon?
Maybe?
Again, the intent is to have the board decide whether to add this article onto the warrant. As we've seen in past years, there are opportunities for the board to withdraw or recommend take no action, and that decision is based on the input that is received in public meetings.
Yeah, so I would be very comfortable putting this in as a placeholder, than having a public hearing where the public comes and voices their opinion, and then we could remove it after that. I don't know if others are.
I think that makes sense.
That makes sense to me.
Okay. All right, does someone want to make a motion to add it to the warrant?
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry. It's hard for me to hear. What problem are we solving with this?
Some neighbors have complained to the zoning advisory committee about too many short-term rentals in their neighborhood. Yeah.
How many neighbors? How many people?
I guess we should watch the zoning advisory meetings. I don't know how many.
I wasn't present at the Zach meeting, so
I don't know.
So this, it doesn't seem like a real pressing concern, and it is I don't know, I guess this is one of those things where we need to do a little bit more preparation, for me, a little bit more preparation, understand the problem and why we're intent on solving it this way.
Okay.
So, you think we should put it in as a placeholder and then take it out later after we discuss it with the neighbors and people want it?
You know, honestly, I can support the placeholder, but I'd like it to come off next week if we don't, I'd like it not to appear on the warrant if we're not really sure we're actually addressing a big issue.
I think we have up until April to remove things from the warrant, is that correct?
No, but they show up. Once the warrant is finalized, it's there.
Yeah, that's not, there's a date by which you can remove it and it doesn't show up, I believe, right?
No, that.
What's that? We have a couple of months, Elaine says, that we could remove it and it wouldn't show up.
But it has to be decided tonight whether or not we place it on the warrant.
What's that? Right, right.
But we haven't.
When is the warrant finalized?
It's in your time.
Yeah. So no more articles can be added after the 31st, but
We have a meeting on 31st, right? So maybe
we do, but we won't have time to post a public hearing
We won't be able to hear from the neighbors in time.
for the 31st.
For putting it on the warrant, so for the 31st.
Yeah, I was thinking if we ask the neighbors on 31st, listen to them, and maybe that night we can decide.
But to post a public hearing, we have to do 14 days, I believe, not 7 days, yeah.
Neighbors could come and speak to it. We don't have to have a formal public hearing.
That's true.
Neighbors could come to public forum. I mean, they could come to public forum and speak to us.
Yeah.
That's true.
Or then we could have an agenda item and they could come and we could entertain comments.
I don't see.
I'm not in favor of putting this on the warrant right now.
Yeah.
I'd rather wait till the 31st. They can speak and we can hear them out, but
We'll decide that.
once it's on there, then there's the process of removing it, so. Personally, I don't see this as an issue, and if they are able to tell me why it is an issue, then okay. But at this point, it just seems like a non-issue to me.
Okay.
Not
Me too.
I'm guessing it's probably more likely an issue in neighborhoods like mine where the houses are close together and you guys living on the, with larger yards, it maybe
Sure.
be an
I mean,
issue, but.
We can talk offline.
Yeah, we can talk.
It's what I think about that, and a way of addressing that.
I think it would be a good idea to let the neighbors come in, as Muriel suggested, to speak up, and
Okay.
maybe someone from ZAC to explain.
Yeah, we can decide next week. We still have.
Oh, yeah, could we invite someone from ZAC maybe to come next week to discuss it? Okay, all right, so I'm okay waiting until next week. Okay, so we're gonna hold on that one for now. Okay, then the next is the net zero resolution. We could co-sponsor that with the Sustainable Green Committee. We did review that last week. I'm comfortable with going ahead and putting that as a warrant, as a co-sponsor.
I'm comfortable as well.
I've read it, and I'm very comfortable with this.
I'm comfortable and excited to have it.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion that we vote to put the Hopkinton Net Zero resolution on the town meeting warrant.
Second.
Okay, and then we need a roll call vote?
Urfanis, really, yes?
Mary Jo LaFreniere, yes?
Shahid Manan, yes?
Amy Rutherbush, yes. Okay, and then the pilot agreement for Wilson Street, do we have any update on that? I've forgotten now, did we review that previously?
I don't remember exactly, however, I think we're in the process of scheduling a meeting to decide whether this really gets on the warrant or not, so this can wait until next week.
Sorry, say it again?
We are in the process of scheduling a meeting to decide whether this is moving forward or not, so this can wait until next week.
Wait till next week on that one? Okay. And I think you sent us something about Alteros, their first choice.
The TIF?
What happened to the number 8?
Their first choice property location has gone under agreement, so they are looking for another property.
So, to the chair, that means we may potentially get new tenant and revenue from 80th Street?
We can't guarantee new revenue, however, yes, it appears there's a new tenant.
Okay.
Okay.
We don't know too much about that yet, if it would.
Yes, we do
They'll
not.
be improving the property or anything. Okay.
So that could be a good news, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so next is the Regional Emergency Communication Center discussion. So the Select Board will consider Happiness participation in a Regional Emergency Communication Center and review a draft municipal agreement between Southborough, Grafton, Westborough, and Hopkinton. The Select Board will take a formal position on the IMA on February 14th, 2023, but we should discuss and ask questions tonight. Norma, did you have a
Can I ask a
presentation?
first question? I'm
Yep.
sorry. Are there more than one version, or is there only one version of the marked up agreement?
I had one, I think it was dated January 9th. Is there a newer one?
Yeah, I don't believe there's a new one beyond the one that is in the packet. And in
I was
fact,
just trying.
Let me see what page it's on. Oh, it says January 19th, the one in the packet. It's on page 28.
No, I don't have it open in front of me. I just wanted to make sure, because one of the questions that was asked earlier didn't necessarily track. I could be in the wrong place. I just wanted to make sure that there weren't two versions. I do have it open in front of me, so I'm fine.
Okay. So this is new for tonight. These are these on the website, or they will be?
yeah, I believe they're on the website. Again, not for discussion necessarily tonight, but rather as a point of reference for our future discussions.
Okay.
Yeah. With the chair's permission, I will walk the board through what I understand to be the draft IMA.
Okay.
You will notice in my remarks, I will be focusing on what I believe are the questions that have been raised by the community, for the most part. And I think one way of doing this is to walk the board page by page.
Okay.
Beginning on page 1, again, to clarify, the towns under consideration are Grafton, Hopkinton, Southborough, and Westborough. One of the questions that was asked earlier, I may have missed portions of it, but I think I heard the tail end, is in relation to selecting Westborough as the location for the rec. Yes, this is a Superfund site. There are meetings scheduled with DEP to ensure what the process is going to be going forward. However, I've also been told that DEP did okay this site previously in some years back. Again, I'm not familiar with the process. I don't work in Westborough, but that's what I've been assured. We have all been asked to participate in the meetings with Westborough. Also, you'll notice under the witness section, there's a specific reference to the existing quality of services that the 4 communities have enjoyed over the years. Why we included that language was to establish at least an expectation going forward in terms of the quality of service. And then moving on to page 2, I think the key here being the term of the agreement is identified as 25 years. This is what the law provides for. So the number of years or the term is identified based on the requirements of the law. There was also a question with regard to the nature of the institution that will be created. I will clarify, yes, we're discussing a district. And late last week, I learned that the law pertaining to the creation of the district was recently updated. In the past, creating a district required town meeting approval. However, under the new law, towns signing an agreement to create a district only require select board approval.
You told the whole town residents that it was opposite, that the town residents got to vote on it, and now you're saying it's not true.
I think we have to speak through the chair. I'll respond through the chair.
I think we are all probably disappointed to hear this. Yeah.
Exactly.
Because that had been my understanding
Yes,
as
that
well.
was my understanding. That was true until a certain point. The law has since changed.
Is it possible to have a copy of that law? I'd like to know when that was updated.
Yes, we will share the law. I think I believe it's section 6A of chapter 40, but we will share that law with you. And then on governance, again, when we share with the because just the comment you made, there are districts in existence that will be created the way that I described them. Yeah. So governance, our effort here was to have a very clear structure that addresses who is in the board of directors. One of the comments that we have had in this community is finding an institution that continues to provide for a stronger connection between the district and the participating communities. And so what we have provided for and are proposing is that each participating community's representative, or in fact it could be the executive director, reports quarterly to the select boards of each participating community. We've clarified the role of the Finance Advisory Subcommittee, especially its role in the budgeting process. Operations Committee.
I'm sorry, am I supposed to be following along here?
Oh, so the one we're going through now is in our meeting packet, I believe?
Yes, it's in the meeting packet, not the one you're holding.
Oh, okay.
Yes. What I shared with you will be discussed at the future meeting, but I just want to make sure I put it in your hands. Yeah. The Operations Committee, we were looking for an opportunity to...
It was in our...
Yes.
You got it? Okay.
Yeah. We're still on page 3. We were looking for an opportunity to allow a continuing dialogue between the director, the fire chief, the police chief, and in some cases the supervisors. So we have identified an operations committee that will provide some general oversight on the performance of the district, again taking back to the day-to-day work, the levels of service provided, and also if there are any issues to be resolved, create an institution that allows for those conversations to be participatory and to be wider than just the staff that work for the district. Next page, which is page 4. I think the key emphasis is item number D, where we are saying the workings of any of the boards identified will be subject to the open meeting law requirements. Provision of services to other entities. This idea is driven largely by the fact that all of us, all of the participating communities, have benefited from mutual aid. And I think what we've heard from the other existing districts or regionalized rec centers is the benefit of having to call on the surrounding towns for help, and thus this provision will allow for that and vice versa. The next pages 5 through 6 go through some of the operational issues, detailing the workings of the operations committee and the type of recommendations that they can make to the board of directors. And then on page 7, we address the budgeting process. Specifically now, we're identifying the executive director as the office that prepares the budget with input from the operations committee and the finance advisory subcommittee. Based on the town meeting schedule for the 4 participating towns, we decided that mid-November will be the deadline for submitting that proposed budget. Apportionment of district costs, nothing has changed from I think what we have seen in other IMAs. It's going to be based on an equal ratio, figuring population 50% and the 911 calls 50% received. There's a question that has come up that we're continuing to look into, namely that for the initial years of operation, what we've been assured is that the capital costs for the district will be borne by the state 911 department through grant programs. We asked if there are any instances where a recently created district had to find money outside the grant program. They could not find any such case. The question being asked is 15 years into this, 20 years into this, large capital programs come up. How are they going to be funded if there's no grant funding? So we are having the legal counsel for the town of Southborough look into this question and will be advising us on how to proceed. What has been discussed so far is perhaps using the language that is used for regional school districts. For example, if Chief Tech has a large capital program, they design the program, identify the costs, apportion the costs, and then each individual town takes that capital request to its town meeting. The bigger question is what happens to the towns that don't vote that capital project forward. And with school districts, if the majority of the districts say yes, even the town that is voting no has to pay its share. However, we are waiting to see what the Southborough Town Council will advise on this issue. Emergency expenditures. Initially, the idea was to identify a revolving fund to handle emergency expenditures, but our advice is based on what we have seen happening to the laws regarding revolving accounts over the last 3 years. The idea was to leave this blank and have the entity that has the fiduciary responsibility for the district identify what accounts will be set up to address emergency funding. Appointment of secretary, this is on page 8. The idea here being we have to think of this in phases. There's a phase of the process where we will not have an institution to run the district. And so the town of Westboro has agreed that it will be the fiduciary temporarily. However, after the institution is set up, the district will be responsible for appointing its finance team as well as the treasurer. Going on page 9, withdrawal we've identified the process for communities to withdraw. There is a question that has been asked about the financial impact to any community that decides to withdraw. We are discussing with the state 911 department for more details. There's a very brief answer that is included in the handout that I did share with you, and I'll address it later on. And then on district personnel, we heard loud and clear from the participating communities about the need to have adequate staffing for this district if it moves forward. And here are the specific provisions that were built into the draft IMA. Number one, the employing entity will be the district. Number two, preference in hiring shall be extended to those persons previously employed by the 911 dispatch centers in the participating communities. We are asking that each community provide a complete list of its employees. And at yesterday's meeting, there was a discussion to further clarify that the list will identify who's full-time and who's part-time. We don't have that language yet. We also have provision C. The aggregate staffing level of the district and the REC may be set at a number of employees that is no less than the cumulative total of those persons currently employed by the participating districts. There was a comment earlier with regard to the use of the word may versus shall. I can tell you that the language that you see that uses may was arrived at through negotiation. I don't believe we will succeed in asking for shall. We did. We landed with may. And here's the simple reason. There's an acceptance for the quality of the level, the quality and the level of service to be provided. There is also the acceptance that if we are employing an executive director, all we can do is to give them a guideline. It's the same as what happens in any institution. Take, for example, the town manager. Town manager is not told you're going to hire 3 people in finance. He is given the directive. You will create a finance team. You will create a land use team, and so on and so forth. So what we have negotiated is guaranteeing a level of service, and number 2, setting a guideline for how the institution will be staffed. We've also included the provision that the participating communities shall use best efforts and will work cooperatively to assist each other in the placement services for current public safety employees who may not be interested in joining the district. And then last but not least, we have added item number F, specifying that the costs associated with any unemployment of public safety employees in the participating community that results from the creation of the district will be shared equally by the participating communities. And again, we negotiated these provisions in response to what we expect in terms of the levels of service, and also in our attempt to protect the interests of our current employees. And then the remaining portions, or remaining pages, pages 11 through 15, are what we call the legal aspects of any agreement. So in a nutshell, what you are seeing in this draft is our effort to respond to the questions that have been raised, the concerns that have been shared with us, and the provisions you see reflect our understanding of the concerns as well as the results of our discussions with 3 other communities. I'll pause at this point before going to any other specific questions that the board asked at your last meeting.
I don't think, so I was definitely disappointed to learn about that there would not be a town meeting vote for all the towns, because I really think that would be a cleaner way to go. Say that. Let's see, I don't think I particularly have other questions about the agreement. I'm happy to, I want to read through the FAQs too. Do other people have questions about what's been presented so far?
I don't.
I do.
Okay.
I do think that the staffing level is something that we need to address, and I know that you just said, Norman, that you don't think you will get shall there. I think we need to actually really talk about that, because we don't want to in any way downgrade our response and staffing. We're probably the town, maybe Westbrook, that has the best service and the best staffing, and I don't think we want that to change. And we heard over and over again when we went on our tour that was the biggest issue that they could identify, having set staffing levels inappropriately from the start.
I think again, as I said, being totally transparent, we argued for shall, we got may. We will continue the conversations. However, I am being transparent. I don't believe we will succeed. However, in terms of staffing, I am convinced, and I think also even in our discussions with the State 911 Department, there's agreement that the staffing that is required here cannot be less than 2 for fire, 2 for police, 2 extra, a supervisor, and a tactical person.
So then I guess that begs the question why they are resisting putting definitive language in that will mandate that.
I mean, Amy, you also...
I did hear the other select board chair, I'm had a meeting with the other select board chairs and the other town managers, and they did indicate that they would not agree to add the word shall. I mean, it doesn't hurt to try again if it means a lot to us, but it seems doubtful that the other 3 communities would agree to it.
It depends how much they want Hopkinton at the table.
Yeah, that's true.
Legally, shall is a very important word.
Did you have some
questions? No, I just wanted to, I've got the contract here, and I have little problems with the withdrawal portion, and it says, written notice shall specify the date on, I think it should be which, not with, such a withdrawal is intended to take effect. In no event shall any withdrawal be effective less than 5 calendar years from the date of such a notice is sent, unless the early withdrawal date is approved by the majority vote of both directors and participating communities. So if we wanted to withdraw and the communities don't want us to, we could be stuck with that vote. And then it goes on about, well, the financials is only 30 days. In order to withdraw, we have to have all of our financial problems put in within 30 days of the notice, and that to me is okay. But a lot of it is percentages. It's by population, how much it's going to cost us. We can get billed, by certain percentages. And I have questions. I don't really like losing our autonomy to 3 other towns who, for various reasons, could vote against us on anything that we want. I don't know, something about this, as I read through it, and I read through all of it, just bothered me that we, we have such a good department right now, and I'm not really, I find there's still problems, there's still questions, and I'm not crazy about this agreement myself, so.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Through the chair, I do have one. So previously, we thought that this would have to go to the town meeting, and I think the town meeting part of this was kind of driving the timeline.
And there's a deadline of March 5th.
March 5th.
To submit the IMA to the state.
Okay.
As part of the grant application.
As part of the grant application?
Yes.
But like deciding in January, that was partially driven by the town meeting piece, wasn't it?
No, it was not tied to town meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the urgency in getting this done, so our deadline is March?
We should, the towns have agreed they would all decide by February
14th.
So that we have until then to make our decision.
Okay.
And then we missed the grant cycle for this year, and where we missed joining as an initial signer of the four-town agreement.
If we don't make it by February 14.
Right, if we don't make a decision, or decide to join it, which we don't have to do that,
But we can decide, so the deadline then to decide if we want to do this is February 14?
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Two other questions I had when reading the IMA. It mentions public records law. Does it specifically mention open meeting law and all the meetings that the directors would be open to the?
Yeah, I believe so.
It does.
Yeah, it does.
It does, okay. And then since, as currently proposed, it's 4 towns, how are tie votes handled? Or does the director get a 5th vote? How does?
Yes, we had looked into whether the director could be ex officio. But I think, again, if there are 4 towns and you don't want a tied vote, you need a 5th vote. So I believe the director will.
So the director would be the 5th vote to break a tie, okay. Or, yeah, okay. All right, Chairman, did you have questions?
I think there's some question from the audience.
Okay, but it's not a hearing, so we should do our questions first.
Through the chair, a couple of clarifications. So to back out, I read the days restrictions, but since Beverly's example, it was 220K, right?
Yes.
In penalty and stuff. Do we have a concrete number or understanding what it could be?
Oh, if we dropped out before it was really created, is that what you're saying? Because once it's created, we have to give 5 years notice, it looks
So
like.
there's no backing out in 5 years? What exactly is that? I'm not very clear on that, so I was trying to understand.
Here's the way to think of it. At the time you back out, if there are any expenses incurred, you have to pay your proportional share. So if you back out before expenses are incurred, you have no payment to make. If you back out after the facility has been built and everything has been funded through grants, you have no expenses to pay. However, if there are any expenses that have been incurred, you have to pay your expenses, your share of the expenses. In answer to the question that Member Mary Jo raised, in fact, we proposed the language in the years, thinking if there's another entity that is leaving and Hopkinton is staying, we want to protect Hopkinton. We don't want somebody to leave and then be saddled with a bigger bill going forward. We believe 5 years allows towns enough time to phase out of an expense. That was the thinking.
I think we should not go into this unless we have the intention of continuing with it. It wouldn't, it doesn't make sense, yeah.
And that's why I think the agreement that we are looking at holistically, it has the components that we need, and we may need to tweak some, like you mentioned, the voting, and I was also not sure about the distribution of the cost and what states part in it. It looks like it's only the towns who are going to bear the cost going forward after it's established and set up, based on the number of volumes and 911 calls, if I read it correctly. But in general, my feedback is we can tune it a little more perhaps, and there are staffing ones that we want to look at a little more closely and give you specific feedback. But here's the thing, in general, I'm still thinking that what is the value proposition that we need to go through all these at this time. And I read the letter from the RECC project director, and it wasn't very clear on a couple of fronts from his message either. So, for example, I appreciate he corrected that the numbers are actually not 25% but 48%, that how many of the towns have adopted it. But I'm still surprised he or anyone could give any data specifically on the savings or the economic benefit. He referred to only the Collins report, and we already know that is in my view, has many holes in that calculation. I would rather have see an answer that we applied it to 48% of the towns, and in the last 5 years we saved $10 million or $5 million. That is easily measurable. Why aren't we getting that number? Second is similar on the other efficiency gains that we are hearing. I'm again surprised that we have 48% adoption. Many of them are 5 years into it, and we don't have data to compare. How can that happen? If that is the case, then it's still maturing and it's still not as efficient as we are preaching, and still not as economically beneficial as we are preaching. Now, coming to the Collins report, here are the holes, and I don't want to take the entire time talking about it, right? One is that we are seeing a reduction of altogether, I think 25 coming all these towns together to 15 in the regional center. So where is the how do we justify that is the right number? It's not very clear. Second is, even with the feedback that we got from the region centers, it sounds like they're even not convinced with those numbers or those type of calculations that it can actually go down significantly. And we already heard that the smaller towns are only limited to one on each. So obviously they will eat up some of the consolidated efficiency gain or some of the consolidated capacity, or we'll have to add more. So altogether the numbers just don't add up. And another hole, and I'll just stop because we can go on and on that, analyzing maybe offline as well, is we talked about that we don't want dark station in this town. I think we're all convinced on that. Now, why isn't that included in the economic benefit or economic calculation? Because if we don't, that means we'll have to hire one additional or two additional officers or staff to not go dark if we go for the regional, right? So that means two additional officer or staff cost will be added to our town expenses. And that kind of shakes the economic model again. I know I threw a lot, but those are, I think, really making me think that A, it's not very convincing, B, such a big decision on something that isn't broken. We're really proud of the service and we're really happy with the service. Why rush and take a risk on something that apparently doesn't seem to be very matured and economically or efficiency-wise still a question mark?
Yeah. In the context, if I may, just very quickly through the chair. I think in terms of staffing, my position is if this is to move forward, the district must be appropriately staffed. So I'm not looking at the 15 personnel that were identified in the feasibility report. I take it for what it was, simple a feasibility report. And then secondly, here in Hopkinton, as you have seen in the budget presented, we have an impending increase in staffing for public safety. So regardless of whether we're going to rec or not, there will be increased costs at the police department and at the fire department. So I just want to make sure that this is understood.
Thank you, Norman. Just to follow up on that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't still address the delta. The additional ask is without the dark station consideration. So whenever we put in the dark station variability into that, I'm sure there'll be new calculation and the chief will come back and say, I asked for 3, but now that we are going to also manage the dark station, it'll be 3 plus X. And I know you also mean that and understand that, but all these coming together, it's not making a whole lot of economic sense from that end, unfortunately.
Okay, so
go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, I think for me, I take Shadow's point that we don't really understand the actual cost savings because of what was in the feasibility study doesn't seem necessarily be accurate with the way we want to staff it. But I guess what I wanted to say too is that we have this choice now, and it does feel rushed to have to decide in February to make this grant deadline. We don't have to do it, but it's unfortunate that we have to make the choice now, but if we don't make the choice, the rec will go ahead with the other towns, and then at some point in the future, this is the unknown, we don't know if the state will say all the towns now cannot operate their standalone 911 centers, they all have to join with another, and we will have lost that control to form the kind of district that we want to be in, and we could end up like, I think Sherburne is in a district where the town, several towns away, and I don't want to, it's an unknown. We don't know if we're going to be in that position in 5 years or 10 years or what. And I like the idea of having some control now where we could have input on what software is used and we can have input on the staffing levels and all the things like that I would like to have some control of. And I fear losing that control when we don't jump in with one of our neighboring towns. And I think Framingham is maybe also doing one too, so it's possible in 10 years we could have a choice between Framingham or the Westboro one if we don't do this. But it's a tough situation and it does feel rushed and I wish that it were not, that we had more time to think about it. But I feel like we might have a better chance of getting more of our staff members employed if we join this rec center than if we wait and see because the other centers might be all staffed, and if this goes on without us, or if a Framingham one goes on without us, and then, I don't know, it's hard to know what would be the right decision for our employees. So that was what I wanted to add. Has Mary spoken yet? I can't.
No, I have a couple thoughts, and I'm going to try real hard not to repeat people. I appreciate a lot of good points. I do think that we need, it is rushed without a doubt. This arrived for us without a lot of preparation. I know that a lot of people have been working on different approaches over the years, but we didn't get a chance to sort of understand this early enough. We do need, before I can go to enter into something like this, we need an appropriate staffing plan for this dark station we're not going to have, right? And understand the cost implications there. I think you're right, Amy, that we could potentially miss an opportunity to have some or many of our current employees employed if we wait. That I think is a very, comes to the point that's a real risk and likely. It's possible that some of our employees seeing the writing on the wall will also apply to the new RAC if we're not part of it. Secure a position for themselves for the future. So all things could happen. I didn't hear, and I apologize, it's a little hard hearing all the conversation. I didn't hear the answer to the status of the site in Westboro in terms of it being a Superfund site. Has it been reclaimed? Is it a brownfield?
I believe Norman said it's already been cleaned up and approved by the EPA, but he's going to verify, is that right?
Yes, it was previously approved for some use several years ago, but that use did not move forward. The Westboro is now engaged in discussions with the EPA regarding this proposed use.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other question that I wanted to discuss, is the issue of the town meeting vote, and whether or not it's a binding vote. I'm not telling this board anything we don't already know. Our mayor is very predominantly opposed to this, and I do think that we need the town's buy-in if we're going to make a change like this, and that's probably part of the problem with moving at such a quick pace. So whether or not we have to have a town meeting vote, I think that we need to consider a town meeting referendum so that we hear from the public. But that is long past the date to sign this agreement, or this agreement if we're going to do it. So I think we need a strategy that, and it would be long before, our town meeting day would be long before any expenses were incurred. So I think that we need an actual strategy to make sure that we can accommodate a town meeting referendum and the town meeting's support or lack thereof. I also wanted to say too that it's very hard for us, and most of us who have had interactions with emergency services in town have had excellent experiences. It's very hard to sort of separate your emotions and your feelings and your loyalties to people who have really stepped up for you in a time of need. So I think that I totally understand people's commitments and passions. It's very hard for us to know whether or not there's a real improvement in services that we're going to experience. And that remains an open question. What seems obvious is that this is the way of the future, and we're going to have to make this decision at some point. So I think that the real decision point is whether or not we think it's important enough for us to have some control, and rather than join when we're forced to at a later date. Anyway, they're just open questions. I don't know any closer to understanding what the right thing is.
Through the chair, just follow up. I agree with Muriel. I think we should explore, and if it's not possible, we should explore how we can put it on the town meeting and have larger discussion, larger feedback, and have the town residents weigh in. And obviously the timing doesn't seem to be working on that. So we need to discuss and find out the strategy. And I mentioned two options in the last, but looks like it's honing towards one option, which is based on the information we have and maybe the open questions we have, as much as we can gather, post that, let's make a decision on that. And second option could be that if we think we need more time to really mature the thinking and understanding and collecting the information, let's push it out and put it on town meeting for getting the feedback and getting the town's approval, and then consider it in the coming years. Even though I would hate to see this hanging and over, the dispatcher's head as for their career uncertainty concern. Now, one thing I want to understand a little more, Amy, Madam Chair, and Norman, you probably have more visibility into it. We keep hearing that we'll have more control or better control. Now, I have my take on it a little bit, and I would like to understand, maybe I didn't hear all the information, which is, we are talking about a standard process. We are talking about a standard region that is going statewide. How can one town have more control over others? That is kind of, how would I say, conflicting to the larger regional construct and framework. And maybe we feel like we'll have more control now, but is that the right framework? How do we know that some other town in future will not have more control than us? So is it kind of a fair statement or argument that we want to get more control by going in early? I would rather have a matured framework and governance model that anyone and whoever wants to join, and wherever they can join, they can get the same benefit as the others, have the same control as the others, same voice as the others. And it is an established governance and understanding, and it is an established economic benefit and efficiency gain. Otherwise, if every town and every region has their own set of rules, own set of control criteria, I don't know. I'm not very comfortable with that conceptually. Just a thought, and maybe again, I don't have enough information like you both do.
If I
To
may.
clarify, I was talking about the control and the creation of the district. Once that's established, we'll have one vote out of 4. But like if Pro Phoenix software is important to us and we let the districts go ahead and establish themselves and they choose a different software, we've lost that choice, I guess. And the staffing structure is very important to us, that there's adequate staffing. And if we don't go ahead with it, they could, maybe they won't write the IMA like this, they will reduce the staffing. I don't know. And again, it is an unknown.
Through the chair, kind of dovetailing off of one of Mr. Menon's points, that's how it's being rushed and how we don't have the opportunity to go to town meeting and have others participate in decision-making. Would it be possible to have a meeting, not a town meeting or a special town meeting, but a meeting open to the public where everyone can, voice their concern, say February 7th, a week before. So we have, we have that input. We have the community speaking. Right now, we're hearing from a lot of people, and it's overwhelmingly against forming this. But I think if we opened it up and allowed for more people to be able to speak, it could even be an online thing, to get that feedback. As I say this because, I think this is a good idea personally, but there's overwhelming negative reaction to it. And then my question is, am I supposed to vote on my belief, or am I supposed to vote for my constituents? Yeah, that's the residents. So so I guess that's my question. Is there a way that we can get something together where we can get the input from the public?
Online, the town has the tools to conduct a survey. Board always has the ability to call a meeting and invite people to participate.
So would board members have any objection, or what's your thoughts on doing like a survey, an online survey?
I don't have any objection to that. I don't know that, I think probably we will get the same information that we already have for people that don't.
But we're giving people the opportunity to speak.
Yeah.
We're giving them the opportunity to speak. Everyone has the opportunity to speak, but we're making it easier.
Through the chair, I think my preference would be to put it on town's vote if we really want to make the decision with towns, which we do, right? We all are hearing and saying the same. If you want to...
But the timing doesn't work.
That means the timing isn't right, in my view.
Right.
It's too premature, it's too rash, and it's just everything combined, not the right time. And one other thing, Norman, kind of dovetailing on your previous, I heard that 25 to 15 may not be the right staffing, we may need more. So then the whole economic model needs to be redone. Couldn't you agree? And eventually we hear that we are going to save $500,000, $1 million. Doesn't look like it's going to stick, right? Let's just lay out all in other words, if you think about it, we are rushing, we don't have enough information, and that's why, as much as we are trying to be transparent, we are not, because we don't have enough information. We're saying it's economically beneficial, but our data doesn't support it, and we don't have any clear new data to really establish the argument. So that's why I can see why it can be confusing, if not, otherwise just that it's not the right value proposition at this time.
I believe I've been very clear on this topic. I have said the feasibility report is a feasibility report. It's incumbent upon us to do our due diligence. With regard to the financial impact, here's what I have said. I am not lining up behind the numbers that I identified in the feasibility report. I have said the only economic benefit I can identify at this point, given what we know, is the availability of grants to move forward the capital components of the district. I have never said this is economically beneficial to the community.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Can I ask one more question? Sorry. Are there any progress on an FAQ that we talked about sending out to the local residents?
Yes, and it's online as well, I believe. Is it online yet? Yeah. We are sharing it for review and discussion at the next meeting. But I just wanted to make sure that I put this in everybody's hands tonight.
So, I'm sorry, so we're going to discuss it and review it for next meeting, but then we have very little time to get it out to the public.
No, it's already out to the public. We have shared it tonight.
But just today?
Yes, just today.
Just today.
Do we know if that it doesn't say that we're going to be voting on it 14th and...
It does.
Yes, it does.
Okay, perfect. And it will go to the internet, we'll ask them to put an insert?
Yeah, we'll ask.
Thank you.
Through the chair, Norman, just to follow up on that, the document we have on page 4, the very first point actually does claim to have the cost savings. So we may want to change that if we collectively, as we are saying, it is not holding up. And especially we are going to distribute it for further consumption.
Yeah, the economic service though is pretty clear. If you read this rest of the sentence, equipment, OPEB, etc.
Right, but how about additional costs that we'll have to now pay for staffing the dark stations? How about additional costs that we may need to pay if there are additional FTEs needed, which it sounds like for the RECC, and we'll have to bear that part as well. So essentially the Collins report, the cost that is estimated on our part is, it can easily go 30, 40, 50% or double, I don't know.
On the dark station cost, if you look at the cons, is bullet number 2.
Right.
But again, we will discuss this at a future meeting. Your point is well taken. Here's what I can share with you. If you go to, here's what I've learned. In speaking with the 911 department staff, they will make an effort to collect the information that we have asked for. They do not currently collect that information. And I think you'll see it in the answers. We've asked for information on the financial operations. They've said, yes, they will give us the information on the budgets. But they don't have the information that compares those budgets to the individual town budgets from before. They've said, if we want that information, we should reach out to those towns. We've also asked for information or data on the KPIs, the key performance indicators. They're saying they are not collecting that information. However, based on the request we've made, they are now putting together a process that will do that.
Thank you for that. So here's my suggestion. My suggestion is what we don't know, we don't know.
Yes.
We just say cost savings, we don't know. It doesn't match up, in our view, we don't know, and we don't think, at least I don't think it is.
Yeah.
Efficiency gain, call time, response time, there's not enough data, we don't know. That is, transparency is not only giving our assumptions, or someone's assumptions, it's giving what we know and what we don't know. If we don't know, we don't know. Let's just give the truth, right? We don't win that, obviously, but...
Which is what we've been saying. I was very clear when this process started. Namely, we were going at our own pace. Some of you have spoken with me, I've said this, we were moving at 50 miles an hour. And then came in the request to accelerate the process so that we tie up with the grant schedule. That's when we started moving at 150 miles an hour. And throughout this process, we've been saying, we don't know this. We don't have this information. We have not claimed that we have all the answers. I've even said that I'll be the first one to say we will make mistakes going along the way. And the value of having these public discussions is that rather than one brain thinking of it, we have 30 brains thinking about it.
So we do have a couple of questions from the audience that I would like to go ahead and entertain those if we can briefly. Okay, so both Don has his hand up and Shannon, so yeah, if you want to speak, you got to come forward. And we're mainly taking questions now, not really comments, because the comments were at the beginning.
Donnie Collins, 45 Teresa Road. I do applaud all of you for, looking over this whole thing with a fine-tooth comb. I think you're all taking it very seriously, and I do appreciate that. Mr. Nasrullah, you haven't been around for a lot of the hearings, and you've probably been kept up through the video or whatever, but I do applaud that. But even the sense I get tonight, you're not, real big on stepping forward too quick. I think if we step forward too quick, whatever the cost savings allegedly may or may not be, is going to be totally undone by if we get in too early and then we try to back out, okay? I'm more of a historian than a numbers guy, but I will tell you, the town of Westboro is insanely busy, okay? You can ask the deputy or the fire chief, and they will tell you it is nothing for them to get 4 or 5 calls at the same time. For a while, they had actually contracted with UMass to have them do the emergency medical portion of giving directions, medical directions over the air. They were that busy, and there were some other issues going on, but that's just insane, and that's just one town. When we had the meeting at the senior center, one of the things was, okay, they're going to hire, like one supervisor and have 6 or 7 workers more in the evening, because evenings do tend to be busier. But then it came out that minimum manning, a few people bang out 6, somebody's on vacation, somebody might be out on maternity leave, they're going to 2 and 1. That's 2 dispatchers and one supervisor. That's what we got now. During the daytime, that's what we have now. We have 2 dispatchers and Megan Monday through Friday. So that's no benefit whatsoever. And you still got the load of 3 more towns on top of that. And Westboro is by far the busiest one. There's no debating that. And then we're number 2, and then the other ones tag along, with 1 dispatcher each.
Okay, well, I really sort of intended that we had more questions rather than, because we already did public comment. But do you have any questions on what Roman has presented?
Oh, no, I don't have any questions. I don't know if I had any answers for you, but just...
I know, I wish we had more answers.
Just for my education for you, but I do appreciate your time and your effort, and you're really taking this to heart. So, thank you very much.
So Shannon, did you have some questions based on...
I did.
Okay.
Shannon Casey, I'm just wondering where the answers for this came from, because there's a lot already wrong in it. It says that the 911 maps your location every time. It doesn't. There are times where it says you're at your neighbor's house or down the street or in the middle of the woods somewhere. It's not always right. So we're sharing this with residents, and you guys are going to base a decision off of it, and it's not right. And there's a lot. Like, I already marked it all up. It's not right. So where did these come from?
Did they come from the state?
It's a combination of ideas, internal, external. Again, we will say the same issue with our system. We match locations, but there are exceptions when that doesn't happen. So, some applies to our current system.
Did you have other ones you wanted to...
No, it was all about how we got these answers, because a lot of them are incorrect.
Okay, so feel free to email those to us if you'd like.
When we went to Norfolk, and they were very explicit that this was not a cost saving, and that they needed more, and that they were going to need more money to expand, and a few other things. But they were also going to get 2 new towns. And I am assuming, I have to assume that those 2 new towns are going to have a contract with, just like this, that, if we don't do it right away and we go in another time, we are going to have a contract.
Right.
And I don't know what's really better to take our time and get the public and people behind us, and because we are going to have a contract anyway, or how important is getting it in such a rush? I don't know. And then I look at this letter from the state, And when they talk about our cost savings to Hopkinton, I just laugh. There's no way that that number comes anywhere close to being a real number. And the state is trying to sell this. So we have to remember, we could be sold a bill of goods. I mean, when I look at that, I go, whoa, wait a minute. And so, I mean, I would rather take the chance that we don't get to have the input in the beginning of the program, and that we can join later at another time, and that we do this and do this right, and that the whole town is behind us. I just don't see why we have to rush into this. And I'm looking at things, and it just everything brings up more questions, not less. It doesn't answer all the questions.
Okay. Kaylee, did you have a couple questions?
Again, my name is Kylie Davis. I work for the town. Before releasing the answers that were provided by the town manager tonight, can I request that, the communication director and the chiefs have a moment to look those over and submit their feedback to correct some of the statements that were said?
That seems reasonable to me. Does that?
Yeah, but it's making an incorrect assumption.
Okay.
From my understanding, this current copy was not reviewed by all.
It's a consolidation of questions and answers that they've seen.
Okay, but I'm asking that the final review prior to it
I'm going
being
to argue with you on that.
released.
I'm telling you, this is a consolidation of questions and answers that they've seen.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I think we're ready to close out this topic for tonight. Is that okay?
Again, as I've said, my door is open. If there's any input that you have any comments, questions, corrections, feel free to send them over to us.
Okay, so next is the town manager's report. Okay.
Okay, town manager's reports. We have the Main Street Corridor project update from the engineering team, Dave and Michelle. One of the, I think, discussion points has been the items and materials that are stored on Marathon Way. Dave is working on making sure that we respond to the concerns, and I've pointed out that we're not moving anything back to Marshall Ave. So if there's anything that may need to be moved, I think we may move it to the rear of Center School, but taking the appropriate measures to secure whatever is moved back.
I think everyone would be very happy to have that area fully cleaned up until spring. Yep.
Sorry, who's gonna do that, this movement that you just mentioned to the Center School?
Remember, this is a Mass DOT contract.
Right.
Dave makes a pitch to Mass DOT. Hey, Mass DOT, ask the contractor to do this. Mass DOT has responded and said they are talking to the contractor to see when they can do this. However, remember, the contract has already demobilized.
Yeah, that's why I was...
Yeah, so that's what Dave is trying to negotiate. We wish him luck and success.
Thank you for taking it forward.
Yeah.
Okay. There's not much on the Main Street corridor right now, right? So PFAS?
PFAS, I think, as I shared with the board, we already received the approval of the permit from DEP. We're now moving forward to secure the materials that are required to do this.
Wait, did you have received the permit from the DEP?
Yes.
Oh, I thought last time you said that we had not received some of them.
We now have.
We now have. Oh, that's excellent. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a relief.
Through the chair, Norman, I think in one of the reports, the data was showing we are, as of December, 31 pp.
Yeah.
So that's way over 20, right?
Yes.
Is it on all wells or one?
Oh, remember how we measure this? We measure this at well 6.
Well 6, okay.
Yeah.
So what is the remediation we are doing now?
We went to town meeting, received funding for a filtration system.
Sorry, let me rephrase that. I know about that, but there's no short-term remediation that we can do or are doing?
Well, we're offering a bottled water rebate, and we are blending the water from well 6 with some of the other wells to reduce the PFAS. But until we get the system in place, we're not really able to do much more. But, so that's progress if we've got the permit and we have the filtration vessels, I believe, right?
Yes.
Okay, so now we're going to get going soon, hopefully.
Yes, and then we are talking internally about how we're going to fund the difference between...
The overrun, yes.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then on the MWRA, we are beginning our negotiations now with Southborough. I received an email from the Southborough town manager asking for specific dates.
Okay, and that will be another IMA
Yes.
for the water, yeah.
Yeah.
Executive session minutes?
Yes, and then the announcement of the release of the executive session minutes. We are releasing the minutes. Elaine, do you mind going through the list, please?
Executive session minutes that will be released are March 10th, 2020. Should I read the topics as well, or?
Just the dates.
Okay, March 10th, 2020, April 28th, 2020, June 22nd, 2020, September 15th, 2020, September 29th, 2020, October 20th, 2022, December 1st, 2020, December 15th, 2020, and January 5th, 2021. And some of those will be redacted.
Okay. I really appreciate you listing the topics, because that lets people know if that was a topic they had been interested in, and they can go back and read it. Okay. All right, anything else from the town manager's report?
I think that's it for tonight.
Okay. Anyone have any questions about that? No?
I'm good.
Okay. So liaison reports and board invites?
For ESBC 2, the design considerations are now currently going on.
Okay.
The site selection, sorry. And it will be soon presented for larger discussion and making a decision. I think the decision date is February 15. Something.
Yeah, I'll give you the dates.
Forums and
Okay.
more meetings in between.
And I think someone sent us an email with the dates. Was it John Graciano sent us an email with the dates today? So one of the steps is us taking a vote too, I believe, right, at the end?
Yes. If I may, January 31st, ESPC meeting, begin deliberations on site selection. February 2nd, school committee meeting, final decision and vote on grade configuration. February 7th, ESPC meeting, continued deliberations on site selection. And then February 19th, ESPC meeting, final vote on site selection.
February 15th?
February 13, 1-3.
1-3.
Yes.
And does the select board also have to vote? I thought there was a step where we had to, after that happens, we have to take a vote?
I believe so, because the select board submits the site selection decision to the MSBA.
So-
I'm not sure if select board votes on it.
I think we do, because we submit to the MSBA, yeah.
Oh, before sending.
But we would wait till the ESBC makes their...
Yeah, they gotta come up with their...
Yeah. So when will we do that, on the 14th?
He said 13.
13th. The 13th is the ESBC.
Schedule and I will speak with John Graziano and then we'll set it up.
Yeah, maybe on the 15th, we have a meeting on the 15th.
14th, yeah.
14th. So we could...
When he was here for the update, he said it was the 28th.
Okay, so our meeting on the 28th. Just, we should all make sure we're all up to speed, because we don't want any surprises when we get to the end of February. We should watch those ESBC meetings, and if we have questions, ask them.
All the site-related information are on the website.
Yeah, they have a couple, a very extensive website, yeah.
Can I ask a question, Madam Chair? Have we heard the results of the capacity study in combination with the recommendations for grade configurations and the elementary school building project?
Through the chair, if I understood, Muriel, you want to see with the configurations how the projected capacity holds up, correct?
Right, so there's a big capacity study, there's the elementary school building project to replace Elmwood, and then there is a grade configuration conversation going on, all that impact how the school is designed and other construction projects. And I'm just wondering if we've had the global conversation that incorporates the capacity study that was also being done.
Yeah, great question. I think I've seen a couple of slides showing those projections. We can collect that. And
So it's a bigger question. Thank you, Shondor. It's a bigger question, and maybe Norman, there needs to be a strategy that really solves our capacity. And I've said this before, that maybe replacing Elmwood, for example, isn't the capacity solution, so it can't come first, even though it does need to be replaced. I want to know how we're making the decision that's based on what information we have gotten about our capacity concerns and projections.
yeah, excellent question. I think that question is still out there for other, up to high school, right? You want to see how the capacity is going to match up with the projections for all the
I thought we had been presented with that, but it could be that I watched one of the ESBC meetings instead. My understanding was that if we did the 2 through 4, it really acted as a pressure relief valve to allow us that space to gradually, they may need to add on to Hopkins, and they need free up space in the middle school.
They're putting Hopkins forward this town meeting.
Are they?
Right? Yeah.
It wasn't one of the ones that town manager?
Back and forth. I don't believe a decision has been made yet. Let's all confirm that.
Well, we have to have the whole conversation to understand what building project is actually going to solve the capacity issues. Not full stop. We can't sort of do one piece at a time without the full picture.
Okay. I feel like from what I've seen, I feel like I understand the full picture, but the only thing that was outstanding to me was that MBTA Communities Act, which is going to require us to zone for 750 housing units, and I don't think that was taken into account at the time they did.
Well, I haven't heard about the big capacity study report out. So maybe you have. I'd like to know what meeting to watch.
We will track that and share the information.
Right, so we'll track that down for next time. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, that was the ESBC 2 update. Did you have any other updates?
No, other than that, there was a library meeting, but got cancelled because of this now.
Okay. Mary Jo, did you have any?
So I've been out of the country for the past month, so
Okay.
No, I don't. I will make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Hold on, I didn't go around to everybody yet, but you don't have any liaison reports or board fights? Okay, and you did?
I do not, no.
Okay, and Muriel, did you have any?
No, just, yes, I do. But first, congratulations to Earth.
Yes.
It's a wonderful reason for being out of country and out of touch a little bit. And now you've been keeping up. But congratulations on the baby.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, that's amazing. So the only update that I have is that the Youth Commission has reorganized. And I'm hoping to meet with the new chair and Dawn in the next couple of weeks. And it's pretty extraordinary. It is a high school junior who is the chair of the Youth Commission. So congratulations to Eva for really, really extraordinary service to the town. It's a very good person.
It's awesome.
That's awesome.
Okay. And then I wanted to note that Shahidul and I went, and several other community members went to the Islamic Mazameen Martin Luther King Day event on Sunday, and that was great. An interfaith event to a lot of our community members were there. And then we also went to the Chinese Lunar New Year celebration at the high school on Sunday also. Yeah, and I hope I'm not forgetting who else. A lot of people were there. It's not just us, but
Wonderful events.
but those were both great events, yes. Very enjoyable. Nice to be in person this year. And then I believe we received an invitation to an Eagle Court of Honor in February for the scouts that were here last month. So it would be good if one of us can go. It's for Troop 4. I don't recall what the date was.
Madam Chair, I did RSVP that I would attend.
Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to go with that, perfect. Okay, I think that's, I don't think I have anything else. Anyone else have any?
Just through the chair, I was heartened to see that our downtown parking is now efficient.
Oh, yes.
So that's very good news. Do we know, I think there are numbers, and it's about weeks, is it, before we
When will
actually
it
have
open?
it?
We are right close to the finish line. We're waiting for lawyers to agree on the language. What you'll notice and what we need to share with the public is when we went to town meeting, we negotiated a parcel that would have created about 31 spaces. The town is getting more.
Oh.
We negotiated more, and we're happy that that is happening. So, stay tuned, we will soon be announcing.
I feel like I read 36. It was,
Yeah, and I'll tell you in 1 second, I'll tell you in a second. Are you finding it, Elaine, or not? I'll find it in 1 second, 1 second.
I'm just happy to see we'll have more
Yeah, I'm happy with 32.
spaces, and it'll certainly add to the downtown convenience.
oh, I might have found
Okay,
it.
it's an additional,
The
31 parking spaces, and then smaller parking lots hold 13 parking spaces. Those are available from 6 PM to midnight.
Oh, wow.
So it's an additional 13, 1-3.
39?
Wow.
39, okay.
39.
Okay, all right, so I think we're ready.
Well, with that, I'm going to second
Motion to adjourn. All right, so roll call vote?
Irfan Rasooli, yes?
Mary Jo Lafreniere, yes?
Shahid Al-Manan, yes?
Amy Roberts, yes.
See you in a week.
Oh, right.
Yeah, see you next week.
Till end of February.
Hello.